The base at Fort Harrison never really slept. Even at dawn, soldiers were running drills across the dusty grounds, their boots slamming in unison like the heartbeat of discipline. Trucks rolled in and out of the motor pool, the metallic clank of tools and the smell of diesel lingering in the air. It was here, amidst the cacophony of preparation and routine, that Lieutenant Emma Hale stood out, and not for her uniform, not for her stature, but for the way she carried a rifle slung casually across her shoulder. The rifle was an M24, its green stock weathered, paint faded at the edges, the barrel scuffed with scratches earned from years of field use. Compared to the gleaming new rifles stacked neatly in the armory, hers looked cheap, outdated, an antique that had no place in the hands of a modern soldier. Colonel Briggs noticed it immediately. "Lieutenant," he called sharply as he strode across the yard, his voice booming above the thrum of engines. He was a man with shoulders as broad as his reputation, his chest heavy with ribbons and his boots polished enough to catch the sunrise. "What on God's green earth is that relic you are carrying?" Emma straightened, offering a salute. "My rifle, sir." Briggs' eyes narrowed as he studied it. "That trusted hand-me-down? We've got state-of-the-art sniper systems in the armory, and you choose that? Looks like something a backwoods hunter would drag out of a pawnshop." There was laughter behind him, a half a dozen young recruits overhearing, their grin spreading at the colonel's jab. Emma didn't flinch. She simply lowered her arm and shifted the rifle into her hands, her fingers wrapping around the worn stock as though she were touching an old friend. "With respect, sir," she said evenly, "this rifle is mine. It's not cheap, it's reliable." Briggs scoffed, clearly amused by her calm defiance. "Reliable? That thing belongs in a museum. Out here, a weapon like that could get you or your team killed. You think you'll impress anyone with an outdated pea shooter?" Emma's jaw tightened. She thought of the years she had spent with this rifle, through training, through overseas deployments, through nights when the only thing separating her squad from ambush was the quiet crack of its barrel in her hands. She thought of the lives it had helped her save. She lifted the rifle slightly, angling it so the colonel could see a small mark etched just above the trigger housing a symbol no larger than a thumbprint, carved into the metal with deliberate care. It was a simple circle enclosing a cross, the Deadeye mark. The moment Briggs' eyes fell on it, his laughter cut off, his breath seemed to stop in his chest. The mark wasn't given lightly. It was whispered about in barracks and training camps, a badge of honor that only the most elite sharpshooters carried. Soldiers who bore it weren't just snipers, they were legends. Every confirmed shot had to be earned under impossible conditions, long distances, moving targets, chaotic terrain. To receive the Deadeye mark meant you had outshot the odds, again and again, until even the army had no choice but to acknowledge your uncanny precision. And there it was, gleaming faintly against Emma's old M24. For a heartbeat, the colonel said nothing. The recruits behind him, oblivious to the weight of the symbol, were still smirking. But Briggs wasn't smiling anymore. "You a broken bar?" His voice dropped, gravelly with disbelief. "You're the one from Kandahar." Emma didn't answer. She didn't have to. Briggs remembered. Everyone who had read the after-action reports did. A sniper pinned down by insurgents, her squad surrounded, running out of ammunition, and then a one by Onia the enemy silenced, each shot echoing like a clock ticking down the seconds until dawn. The distances had been impossible, the wind fierce, the cover scarce. But she had made every shot count. The mark on her rifle wasn't for decoration, it was earned in blood. The colonel cleared his throat, trying to gather himself. "You didn't realize." Emma studied him, her face impassive. "With respect, sir, a rifle is only as cheap as the hands that hold it." The recruit's smirks faded. Briggs shifted uncomfortably, but pride kept him from backing down entirely. "Still," he said, more softly now, "skill or no skill, the army expects its soldiers to use standard issue. That rifle isn't regulation." Emma's lips curved slightly, almost a smile. "Regulation doesn't pull the trigger, people do." Later that day, the entire platoon gathered at the range for marksmanship drills. Targets had been set up at staggered distances, some close, others barely visible against the horizon. Soldiers took turns firing, their rifles cracking in the air, casings clattering against the concrete floor of the firing line. Colonel Briggs stood at the front, clipboard in hand, barking orders and jotting notes. When Emma's name came up, A hush fell. She stepped forward, calm, her M24 slung across her back like it had always belonged there. "Let's see what that museum piece can do," Briggs muttered, though the edge in his voice was gone. Emma dropped to one knee, set her rifle on the rest, and adjusted the scope. Her breathing slowed, her heart steady. She didn't hear the whispers of the recruits behind her, or the colonel shifting uncomfortably a few feet away. All she heard was silence, the kind that lived between her pulse and the rifle stock pressed against her shoulder. The first shot cracked, the bullet sailing clean through the bullseye at 400 meters. The second split the first. By the third, the recruits had stopped whispering. By the fifth, even the sergeant at the spotting scope muttered something that sounded suspiciously like a prayer. Emma didn't stop. At 600 meters, the targets fell in neat succession. At 800, she adjusted for wind drift and hit dead center. At 1000, when most rifles wavered against the distance, her bullet found its mark as though the target itself had leaned into her crosshairs. Finally, she stood, chambering one last round. A steel plate had been set up at 1,200 meters, barely visible, a mere speck against the horizon. She didn't ask for permission, she didn't announce herself, she just raised the rifle, inhaled, and let the shot break like glass. The plate rang. For a long moment, no one spoke. The recruits who had laughed at her rifle earlier stared, slack-jawed. The sergeant scribbled furiously on his clipboard, muttering numbers that didn't seem real, and Colonel Briggs, a broken bar. He just stared at the rifle, at the faint Deadeye mark glowing in the sunlight. He cleared his throat. "Well, Lieutenant," he said finally, his voice quieter now, almost respectful. "Seems that old relic of yours still has some bite." Emma slung the rifle back over her shoulder, her face calm, unreadable. "It's not the rifle, sir," she said. "It's the shooter." That night, the story spread through the barracks like wildfire. Recruits who had mocked her now whispered about her with reverence, their voices carrying awe instead of derision. The colonel, for all his bluster, didn't mention the rifle again. Some said they saw him standing alone at the range long after dusk, staring at the steel plate at 1,200 meters as if trying to make sense of what he had witnessed. As for Emma, she said nothing. She simply cleaned her rifle in silence, running a cloth along the barrel, her movements steady, almost tender. It wasn't cheap. It wasn't outdated. It was a part of her, forged in every mission, every shot, every heartbeat that had led her to this moment. The Deadeye mark wasn't about the weapon. It was about the bond between soldier and steel, the trust that no regulation, no mockery, no colonel's laugh could ever break. And as long as that mark remained etched into her M24, no one would ever mistake her rifle or hero for less than legendary.